Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 122 of the podcast. Today is Monday, June 3rd, 2024, as I record this. And today we're talking to Herman Steuernagal about paving the way for your authoring. We talk a little bit about how he got into writing, why he decided to go indie, and also about using Kickstarter to kick off a debut and or a novel after you've been publishing for some time. We talk about his shifts in the strategies for writing, where he started versus where he is today. And you learn a lot of tips and tricks about what things you might want to start with if you're just beginning to write today and hoping to spur an author business. So I think you'll want to stick around for that conversation. He's absolutely a delight to talk to. He also has a podcast of his own, which we talk a little bit about as well as part of the interview. So something you'll want to stick around for. Now, in terms of updates this last week, I feel like once again, there's always this place where a lot has happened, but also not a lot has shifted. And so, it really comes down to perspective because for us, we're settling into having a cow. When we first purchased the cow, it felt a little weird, right? Having this animal that was much larger than you, that eats a lot more than the goats, but she's sweet. She's honestly the kindest thing in the world. The goats are still skittish because that's just how goats are a lot of the times. We can try to play as nice as we want with them, but for some reason, something sets them off and then they get scared again. It's very odd. But she just watches them run around like, you guys seem like a bunch of crazies. So it's a breath of fresh air. She'll come running to you. She loves being pet. She loves people. She loves the kids. So it's a blast so far. So really now it's just about preparing for the baby, which will be coming in August. But in terms of babies, our last and final goat, Malo, had her baby just this weekend. So absolutely tiny thing. She looks just like her mom. So for context, Malo, um, she was born a year and a half ago to a full black goat. She's white, beautiful white with some brown and black spots. She does, she looks like the proverbial black sheep of the family. She doesn't look like any of the other goats. Then she had a baby that looks just like her. Cute little white thing. She's so tiny. She's so friendly, just like her mom. But so now we don't have to worry about goat kidding anymore. Now we just have to worry about calving. The cow having her baby in August. And of course, that is post us having our baby in July. So as a reminder, who knows what's going to happen with the podcast? I mean, depending on when our next baby is born, there may not be an episode. Not too worried about that. But if in the middle of July there's a blank period of time, a week where I don't publish, probably because the baby was born and it just didn't make sense to do an episode that week. So something to keep in mind. I do think that we're more, her calving is normal, so I think we're prepared for it, so to speak. But there's things we need to prepare for winter, and also trying to get her into a place where she can go graze. She can go out to pasture and eat grass out there. We have quite a bit of pasture land. It's just kind of dead because it's not being watered today. So part of that objective, what I've been working on is getting the head gates to our irrigation system all dug out. Hasn't been used in years. I don't even know if the previous owners used it. It might have been the owners before them that used it. So the head gates are all buried in by mud and dirt and plants and all sorts of other things. So yeah, that's what I have been working on. And yeah, it's been really fun. But in terms of authoring this last week, I did go through and edit my short story to Commune with Spirits. That is ready to put before my writers group. We'll see how they react to that this week. And then I'm getting back into editing Dragon Blooded. So it only took a few days, really 2 days to get through chapter 5, and it has 22 chapters. So I really am confident that if I hit it hard within the next week or two, I will have read through it all, added some things, and then it'll be ready to go to a proofreader and ARC readers. So really looking forward to that. It's already been line edited, feeling really good about it. And then I can, start preparing for the publishing process, which should be really interesting. As a reminder to you, I am on Ream. I have a Ream community. If you're interested in reading Dragon Blooded prior to it being published, all of the chapters are up there. Well, not all of them, about a third of the chapters are up there. with one, I think it's two chapters, so a chapter every 2 weeks getting put up as kind of a, early access to them. So if you want to join that, it's just a little bit per month and you can access the chapters, comment on them, tell me what you think about it. And that's not just any of my young adult stories, any of them. So that does include a lot of the short stories that I've written for Writers of the Future. Those have not been released to the public yet as well. Eventually, I will publish those in novel format, but for now, they're just on the Reams Stories community. Any short story I write, I'll put up there alongside the other books. And then if you're looking into epic fantasy stories, The Etcher's Plight is also there. So I've also decided to put a full library of my books on Ream. Now, it's not quite ready yet. I do anticipate by the end of this week, I will have put up all of my published works into a new tier of Ream. So if you'd like to support me and you want access to all of my books published at any given time, then you can do that. So it'll just be a subscription fee. Obviously, it'll grow over time. I don't intend on changing that subscription, so the value will increase over time. But yeah, you can get access to all of those via the Ream Reader and all the different types that I can put up there. I will put up there. Unfortunately, that does not include the Cyber City Kids trilogy because that is published through a publisher that is not self-published. So that is probably, a learning for me is I will unlikely do that again. I did like the co-authoring piece of it, but I don't necessarily love the not having full creative control over the manuscript and the art and everything that is connected to that story. So, a little bit of a downside to that. I did appreciate the process and I have no qualms or issues with my publisher. But at the end of the day, I need access to my work so I can do with it whatever I'd like. Still, if you'd like to join the Ream, it's up there. I'd appreciate your support. And other than that, really formatting my private store. It's not really private, but the direct selling store. You can buy ebooks from me directly. You can buy print books that will be printed through Book Vault, or if you want signed books, I have those as well. Happy to sign and ship them. So all of those are accessible through my website. If you just go to dankenner.com and click on the shop tab, then it'll take you there. So I'm really just setting up for direct selling because not that I dislike Amazon as a distributor. They're obviously the big power, and I will never take my books off Amazon or Apple Books or Ingram Spark. I'll always have them up there. If you'd like to buy them directly from me, generally I can offer a cheaper price because, they're not Amazon or these other stores aren't taking a big cut of it. So it's easier to lower the prices on my direct store. And ironically, I do get more from it. So that's kind of the power of selling direct. I'm going to be looking into Facebook ads to direct traffic to that store rather than through Amazon, and we'll see how that goes. That's going to be kind of the plan over the next few months. We'll see how the shift goes and how the marketing goes within Facebook ads. Obviously, I can't use Amazon ads to direct outside of Amazon. So maybe I'll address those again at some other time, but right now I'm taking a break from those. And I have no issues with that. So, lastly, this podcast is free and will always be free and available for you. I want nothing more than to provide delightful and positive and uplifting content for you. But, the time and the costs that are associated with the podcast are from my own pocket, which I'm more than happy to front and do that for you. However, if you are interested in supporting, you want to show your support and show your recognition of the content, you're always welcome to support me through my Patreon. It's patreon.com/the casual author. So once again, no pressure. If you have a couple dollars a month, a lot of people would buy one copy of coffee with that, then I appreciate that. If not, then I appreciate your support and listening. Definitely share, like the podcast, whatever you want to do to help others find the joy that hopefully you're finding in this podcast as well. But I believe that's everything for the updates this week. So we can go ahead and shift over to the interview portion with Herman. Hey Herman, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dan. How are you doing?
Doing very, very well. Thrilled to be able to talk
Fantastic.
to you. I love talking to fellow podcasters and authors because I feel like we have so much in common. But
Yeah, it's always a great time.
before we dive into all that fun stuff, how long have you been writing and publishing?
Writing since as long as I can remember. I have vague memories of writing little short stories in grade one and grade two. And I loved writing ever since then. But as far as writing on scale and writing for the purpose of publishing, it's been 4 years now. My first book published the end of 2020.
Nice. Okay, so what changed? What made you shift from writing just recreationally to turning it into something a little bit more serious?
Yeah, so I probably wrote through high school and into college. And then once I got out of college, life kind of gets in the way and I kind of stopped writing. I maybe started a story here or there, but I didn't take it seriously. It was something that was always in the back of my mind, one of those bucket list things that I always wanted to do. We were talking before the show a little bit about how I had to quit my business and I switched jobs due to some anxiety and that sort of thing. Um, this is kind of a long, convoluted story to get to this point, but it will get there. So I found myself with some extra time anyway, because I was running a business. All of my free time had been going into my business. I didn't start writing then, though. I instead started running. Some friends of mine decided that, or at least they convinced me that I should run a half marathon with them. I was never an athletic kid. I've never been an athletic person, really. So I had done some cycling and that sort of thing at that point, but running was not anything I had done. So I basically went from couch to half marathon in 3 or 4 months.
Well,
And at the end of that, I mean, I felt great. It was awesome. But people were coming up to me at the end of that saying, "Hey, that's great. Congratulations. Way to cross something off your bucket list." And at that time, I was like, well, running a half marathon wasn't on my bucket list. It was just something I kind of did. It was, I put no thought into it, but it was a lot of effort. And so I thought, well, I have some extra time now, in my on my evenings and weekends. Why don't I do something that actually is on my bucket list? And that's write that novel I've always been wanting to write. So I started then, basically the next month, I started putting an idea that came to me down, and it ended up being my first novel, Lies the Guardians Tell. And, that took me about a year to write. And during that point in time, I like to look into what I'm doing and try to figure out the best way to do it. So I was looking into publishing options already, even kind of as I was writing it, and decided to take it down the self-publishing road with it.
yeah. I love that. I mean, the one thing I always tell people is when they say, "Well, this is a really long story," I'm like, "Great, it's podcast worthy, right?" And
Yeah.
long explanations are exactly perfect. And I think it's really interesting how your story is similar to mine. Mine is the half marathon because I do run, but I'm not half
Mm.
marathons. Um, I'm impressed, by the way. Congratulations on
Thanks.
that.
Thank you.
So yeah, I didn't start till 2020. Now I had
Mm.
written a little bit beforehand. I haven't been writing my whole life, but. So, I mean, that's really cool. And you write sci-fi. Do you write some fantasy as well? Or is it primarily sci-fi?
It is so far it's been primarily sci-fi, but my upcoming release is a fantasy novel.
Okay, and that's what I was like in my mind. I feel like you've written and have published, but you are about to publish. So, and you have a
Yeah.
Kickstarter starting very soon. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Or
right.
yeah,
Yeah, as we're recording, it's starting tomorrow. So
nice,
it'll be running from May 25th until June 22nd or 3rd in that area.
nice.
Yeah, so depending on when this goes up, it may or may not be running still.
No, it will be
Um,
right in the center of it. So
Perfect.
that's
Perfect.
perfect. If you're listening
Yeah.
today, there's a link to it. So we'll
Yeah,
make sure it's
definitely.
in the show notes.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so it's for my upcoming novel, The Bartender Between Worlds, which is a cozy fantasy novel. It's a bit of a deviation from my other novels, which have been kind of dystopian sci-fi. It's a complete turn on that. Definitely needed a break after my last couple novels were published. But it also happens to be my 10th novel. So I wanted to do something really special. I got a pretty cool cover created for it. I can grab it here, actually.
Yes,
For
show us
those
that. I've already seen it,
those
but
who are
those who
watching.
haven't,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I just got this in the mail the other day, so I'm pretty impressed with it. So it's got a gold foil cover. I've got some color illustrations inside that my wife has done up, and I should have prepared for this, but I'll show you one of them here
oh, cool.
that I printed in them. Yeah. I'm I'm super happy with how it turned out. So that the Kickstarter is for this special edition. It'll only be available on Kickstarter. Yeah, other cool thing like there'll be some drink recipes and that sort of thing that are included with it and that sort of thing. Yeah, that is a Kickstarter.
So what led you to the route of Kickstarter? I know they're getting very normalized and popularized for good reason, right? There's a lot of
Hmm.
people doing them. So what led you down that pathway?
I had a number of friends who had done Kickstarters for the books and they ended up fairly successful with them. But really, when I was thinking about this book, it's something different than what I had have done in the past. So I needed to reach a new audience with it. Kickstarter seemed like a way to tap into a different audience. But again, like I said, it's my 10th book. I wanted to do something special with it, and Kickstarter really provides a way to do something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do just publishing through Amazon or whatnot. Being able to do the gold foil covers, being able to do the color pages inside, it was just an opportunity for me to do something fun with this book that I really hadn't had the chance to do with other books.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really cool. So 10 is a very great milestone.
Hmm,
The 10 of many. I'm sure you'll reach 100 before you know it.
I hope
Um,
so.
but how did you go about learning what you needed to do to print the special edition? Because I know there's the art, you have to figure all that out, whether you have a family member or commission someone, then how do you
Mhm.
get it printed? How did you go about learning all these things?
Yeah, a lot of it was just kind of stumbling along and but there's a lot of resources out there. One book that helped is that I took a look at is called Kickstart Your Novel. The author's name is escaping me right now.
That's
But
okay.
if someone Googles it, it's a great resource for that. Also, just kind of looking at what other authors have done. There's a few Facebook groups out there for kickstarting for authors. Those have been great resources. I definitely, like I said, I had friends that were running Kickstarter, so they were also great resources to ask. Yeah, and the gold foil print wasn't actually something I was going to do initially. It was something that in the back of my head was going to be a stretch goal. But I got a print proof of the cover just printed, and I really wasn't satisfied with it. As far as it being a special edition and really wanting to do something special for my 10th book. So I looked into options for the gold foil print, found an option that wasn't actually that much more per copy as the printed copy was. So um, got a proof rush shipped to me so yeah, I could get it and take a look at it before the campaign started. That part was expensive, but it yeah, it definitely there definitely are resources out there that helped out. Definitely, getting myself involved in the community and finding other authors running Kickstarter campaigns, that was a big help in trying to find those resources. And I am very lucky. My wife is a very talented artist, and she agreed to do the sketches for the book. She normally paints, so it wasn't even something that occurred to me right away. She's done, some sketch art before, but when I kind of thought about some options, I thought, I asked her, I was, hey, is this something you would be willing to try out and do for me? And she said yes. So there are definitely going to be at least 6 sketches in there. If we hit some stretch goals, there'll be more, but I'm really excited for all of it.
I mean, I think you could make the case for having some painting versions in book form. I think that'd be really, really cool. I don't know that I've ever seen it done before, but
Yeah.
I think that'd be really cool if you could find a way to get it to scan and look nice. That I think that would
Mm.
be the trickiest part is representing the painting properly in book
Yeah.
format. But you never
Yeah,
know.
you never know though, because I was impressed with how her drawings came out in the book. She's also her main source of income is she's a professional photographer, so she does wedding photography and that. So she took, some nice photos of the work. It wasn't just me like trying to scan it in or take it with my phone or anything. But when the print came back, I showed her and she's like, she said it looks like I drew it in the book. Like the quality of the printing is actually incredible.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so I'm sure if it was a painting, it probably could do that. And that might be something to consider in the future for sure. That's not a bad idea.
I mean, I think I would appreciate that. So here's the thing about Kickstarters. It's breaking my bank because I love special editions. So I have to like stay away from Kickstarter because I'm just like, oh,
That's
I'm spending
fair.
too much money there. But I absolutely
Yeah.
love special editions. It's really cool. I've got a bunch of them
Hmm.
that I go to support authors and come away spending too much because I'm just like, that just looks so pretty. That's so
Yeah.
cool. What a
Yeah.
great way to celebrate it.
Yeah, I understand that though, like, but I'm in Canada here, so any special edition like that I try to purchase ends up being almost double for the shipping
Yeah,
sometimes.
it's true.
So getting things shipped up here tends to be a bit more cost prohibitive.
which is kind of insane, but we don't have to get into that. We don't have to get into
Yeah.
shipping costs. It is just
Yeah.
something to consider.
Mhm.
But I'm curious to know for you, because you've been doing this 2020 and you chose to self-publish, which, there's ins and outs to self-publishing and traditionally publishing. Um, do you think that you will continue moving your business in this direction, or do you think it'll shift in the next few years?
Yeah, do you mean like in regards to self-publishing or traditional publishing or
Yeah, just the
yeah,
route for publishing and how quickly you're publishing. Because I mean, 10 books in
yeah.
2020, that's pretty fast
It
for a lot
is.
of people.
I imagine it'll probably, I mean, so it's an average of probably about 2.5 books per year. I'd probably, I might slow that pace down a little bit, especially during COVID and that sort of thing. I had the opportunity to write a lot more than, um, I mean, otherwise, because I had nothing, there was nothing else to do other than, so I'd work and then I'd write. Um, Last year, I kind of burnt myself out a little bit doing that. That's part of the reason why I switched into a cozy fantasy from my sci-fi, just because I was
Mhm.
pushing too hard throughout the year. And really, my personal life suffered because of that. Um, so I probably won't, as long as I have a day job, I probably won't maintain that speed of publishing. As far as the and we can talk about my shift into cozy fantasy too some more if you want. But as far as self-publishing versus traditional publishing, I'll probably continue the self-publishing route unless I get some ridiculous offer from a publisher. I mean, I'm not, I mean, I'm happy with it, but I mean, write a big enough check and I'll,
Mhm.
and and I'd be happy to sign a deal. But I like having the control over my product. I like being able to have a book finished and hit publish on it once it's ready to go and not wait through for the hurdles. And it can take a year or more for a traditional publishing um, from when you finish the manuscript to when it's published. Like it's a long process, and I tend to be impatient a lot of the time. So I like having the flexibility to manage my own timeline for my product. Um, and as well, I do struggle marketing a book that I'm not either currently working on the series for or have just finished the book for. I can't imagine having written being a book or two ahead of the book I'm trying to market. I feel like I would find that pretty difficult to do.
You're not alone in that. I'm totally the same way. So
Mm,
some of the books that I've published my first book in 2020 as well. And I think about that book and trying to market. I'm like, do I even remember
I know.
what the book is about? Which is, being a pantser myself, I legitimately write a book and then forget what happens. So
Yeah.
it's kind of wild when you come back and edit it 3 months later and you're like, I don't even remember what happens. Like, let's
Mhm.
go through this and figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like that first series, I still have one more book to write in it too, and I'm gonna have to go back and reread the entire thing to make sure
Hmm.
finish. I get everything right. I know I was doing another interview a little while ago, and someone was asking me about my first series, and I'm like, kind of forget my main character's name. So
Sure.
I mean, I know what I have a general sense of what the book's about, but the details, I was like, oh yeah, I don't know. It's been, probably 3 years since I've read it. So
Yeah, I mean, and so it's just a different way people work. I've talked to a bunch of different
yeah.
authors that are very heavy outliners. They take tons of notes. They remember a lot of the tropes and details about their books, and I
Uh,
don't. So it's just like that does make marketing kind of tricky, right? Because you
yeah,
know what needs to be said to appeal to certain audiences, but you can't identify what's in your books that will appeal to them.
right.
So that's the tricky thing. I need to be better about that.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, I'm probably this much the same. I do a little bit of both outlining and pantsing, but mostly pantsing.
Hmm.
I really do try to put an outline down at the beginning and try to get a basic sense of where the story is going. But um, a lot of the stuff I just have to discover. And
Hmm.
even during my writing process, I'll get to the end of the book, realize, the something that was an overarching arc or an overarching theme, and have to go back and, rework some of it, you know, after the fact too. So my outlines never really stick to the plan, or my story never sticks to the outlines plan, I should say.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Totally get
So
that. That's why I don't even try outlining
mm.
because I just don't gonna ignore it. But so I'm curious to
Uh,
know. I haven't. unfortunately had a chance to read some of your books. They're on my list. Tons of books are on my list. But I
Yeah,
do want to talk a
get
little bit
it.
about your shift to cozy fantasy because,
Yeah.
I mean, is it just that writing the sci-fi was too arduous, just took too much mental power? What came into that decision to shift?
Yeah, I think part of it was shiny object syndrome, just, something new
Mm,
caught my attention. But, it was um, the last two books that I wrote at the end of last year, I released them one after another because they were really one large story that I kind of split into two. So Chimera and Resurgence, which were book two and three of my Fractured Orbit series, which got published in October and November. They were really, a dark dystopian book. The ending of Resurgence is pretty grim. And I just wanted like I had spent, I mean, the first book in the series came out in February, so I'd spent a good solid year or more in this universe, and I just wanted something lighter as a kind of a palate cleanser. Um, this book was supposed to be a novella. It ended up being longer, which is fine. But I just planned to like put something quick together and have a quick break and then get back into the Fractured Orbit series. Because yeah, really it was just wanting something lighter, wanting something just something fun to write. And it turned into a 300 page novel of its own, which is fine. I think it's a better story for it. Um, but yeah, really the shift was just to take a quick break and write something a little more lighthearted and have a little bit more fun and dip my toes into the fantasy realm.
So is this your first time ever writing fantasy, or because you said you've been writing a lot of your life, had fantasy come out
Yeah.
that maybe you just
Hmm.
shoved in a drawer somewhere, or is this really your first time?
And when I say I've been writing my entire life, I haven't finished anything, before my first book, and even my first series had a little bit of fantasy worked into it. But as far as a strictly fantasy story, I mean, I started on, like a vampire story in college and a few other things, but as far as like a fantasy world story, this is probably my first one, thinking about it.
Very cool. I feel like you and I are exact opposites because I have spent a lot of time reading sci-fi. I do like fantasy. I'll read a lot of
Mhm.
fantasy. For
Yeah.
some reason, the idea of trying to write sci-fi, just like it's overwhelming. So I haven't done too
Yeah,
much of it.
my sci-fi is pretty light. I don't
Sure.
go too hard into the hard sci-fi. That's just not who I am, and I could, but I'd rather not. I don't want to get bogged down too much in the details of the science. It's there. I try not to make, especially in my Fractured Orbit series, I try not to make things completely unrealistic and unbelievable, but it's not so unapproachable of a sci-fi that I mean I'm worried about calculations and density of planets and that sort of thing. Um, but I do read a lot of fantasy. I read a lot of fantasy as well, and I read some sci-fi. Like, but I feel like I just kind of stumbled into a sci-fi story because it was my first idea.
Yeah, that's
So it
fair.
could have equally have been a fantasy story, and there are a lot of fantasy elements in Lies the Guardian's Tell. Um, there's a lot of inspiration from Wheel of Time, probably because that's what I was reading when I started writing it. Um, and it's really I call it's a YA dystopian series. It's probably really a science fantasy series because there's a lot of fantasy tropes and there's a lot of, I mean, but it's about artificial intelligence. So there's
Mm,
so there's sci-fi elements too.
yeah, sci fantasy.
Yeah.
I have a friend who actually writes a lot of sci fantasy, so
Mm.
it's a very interesting genre. It's very cool. I like that a lot. So what have
Yeah.
you found when it comes to post publication? Do you enjoy the experience of getting your book out there and marketing, or is that something you don't love, you struggle with? Curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I do. I struggle with post marketing for sure. I'm great with the build up because as I'm writing, as it's going through the editing process, as we're getting closer to the date, I'm still excited about it, and you know, um, but once it's done, once it's published out after the first week, I kind of crash, and
Mm.
I'm on to the next thing. I have, my brain is very much has futuristic tendencies and just wants to get on with the next project because by the time the book is out, I've been living in it for 4 to 6 months or longer, um, and my brain's already thinking of the next idea. So
Hmm.
I do find the marketing post publication to be difficult, trying to get better. It's a little easier when like with Eclipse, I was working on book two and book three at that time. Like after that one was out, so it was a little bit easier to continue marketing Eclipse because I was still in that universe. Um, but um, but yeah, it's definitely not an easy task for me.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are that same way, but
Hmm.
everybody kind of finds their intuitive glimmer of light when it comes to marketing. There's some things that, I mean, you're running a podcast in a way
Yeah.
that's marketing to a degree, maybe in a different way, but
Right.
um, well, I've heard it said that you do what you enjoy consuming. I found that to be true about
Right.
myself. I don't really love consuming social media. It's not really what I like to spend my time doing. And it turns out
Yeah.
I also don't love putting a lot into it, which is
Right.
entirely just me. It's just my personality. So,
Hmm.
what have you found you liked about it? Is there any glimmers of light in terms of successes that you've had for marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I really like doing this. I like chatting, with other authors, other podcasters, and um, just building that community around me has been really, really great. That has really been the biggest benefit of starting my own podcast is, getting to know other authors and to be able to have conversations like this. That's probably been the most rewarding part of marketing, even though I've kind of shifted my thinking and, it's like you said, it is kind of marketing, but it's not really my main intent with it at this point. It is more that, building the connections and networking with other authors, but that has its own rewards as well, right? I've been able to, I mean, other authors have been willing to share my work because of it. And you network and you build each other up as part of the author, community, and that has been helpful. I'm like you. I mean, I don't really like social media. I'm on it kind of because I have to be as far as promoting my books go, or at least we're made to feel like we have to be. I don't know how true that necessarily is, but um, I do have TikTok and Instagram that I use, and it's been somewhat effective, I guess. I mean, I'm still doing it. Do I enjoy it? Well, not really. But um, but it's all about building a presence and helping readers discover who you are, right? Like, I mean, if it wasn't for TikTok, I would probably not have heard of you, because that's I think where I first came across your books and your TikTok account there. So it is effective to some degree.
Well, and once again, this isn't, I always talk about TikTok. I'm sure people think you'd be like, Dan hates social media. I mean, I do to some degree, but I also recognize the
Yeah.
value of it. I
Hmm.
am also on social media, kind of. I've got one foot in, one foot out at any given time.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think part of it, whether or not it's true that we're made to feel like you need to be on it, it really does come down to social media is a really easy and effective. I'll explain easy in just a minute. Easy and effective way to connect with people.
Hmm.
Um, and it's free, right?
That's
And that's
amazing. Yeah.
something to keep in mind as well, and if it's something that you're good at and it's palatable to you, then social media is awesome. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people that find a lot of success with it. I was actually on a podcast recently where we discussed social media, and I explained that my problem with social media has nothing to do with other people, it has everything to do with myself. That because of my introverted self, I really struggle to connect via short form content.
Hmm.
It's the entertainment factor is there. When it comes to
Yeah.
like commenting on things or responding to comments, I feel limited because I don't feel like I can connect with you. And so that
Right.
puts me off, right? It has nothing to do with you, it has everything to do with me. And,
Yeah.
I prefer long form. And that's why I started a podcast. Same thing.
Yes.
I really wanted to connect with people. I was feeling isolated as an author. And this has
Yeah.
seemed a really effective way to build a community and get to know people. And it's worked.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
find, my problem with especially with TikTok and Instagram to some degree, but especially TikTok is it's too easy just to get lost on it.
yeah, it's true.
And you go on there to post your content or whatever, and then you're stuck in there scrolling for half an hour
Yeah, it's
without
true.
without intending to. And that's my problem with it.
It's
It's I
true.
mean, I have better things to be doing, but the
Hmm.
algorithm is so well fine-tuned to keep you there. Like it's no fault of ours that we're doing that because that's how it's designed. It's designed to tap into that, programming in our head to,
Hmm.
get that dopamine fix. So I do have other problems with it for that, those along those reasons. Um, yeah, with the mediums themselves, not with the posters or the, you know,
No.
being on there to begin with, but.
Yeah,
It's all the
maybe.
yeah, it's all the social programming that goes into it to, keep us locked onto our phones, right? And I don't really like that aspect of it.
No, when we really want people locked in our books, and
Exactly.
that's where we want
Yeah.
people spending their time. That's the point of us writing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I get the effectiveness, but maybe not the most enjoyable. So I'm curious to
Mhm.
know, since you've been running your podcast, I mean, you talked a little bit about why you got into the podcast, and
Yeah.
I know what it's like. Running a podcast is not always the easiest. There's a lot of
Mhm.
work that gets put into it, a lot of steps. So what keeps you doing it despite the
Um,
craziness?
Yeah, like I said before, it's really about connecting with other authors. I don't think I realized how powerful of a medium it was for doing that when I started it. Um, it's not why I started it necessarily. Like I started it to kind of help other authors discover an audience. That's what I really wanted to do with it. Um, but the more I've done it and the more I continue it, and there's moments like you said, it's a lot of work. So there definitely have been weeks where I'm like, why am I even doing this? I have 100 other things I need to get done. This is just one extra thing that I'm putting on myself, and it's a good evening or two a week, sometimes depending on how many interviews and how long the interviews get to be. I know you said you don't do much editing. I kind of go through each podcast and listen and at least kind of background noise and stuff. So it's usually a couple hours for me to do that. But um, I lost my train of thought a little bit, but Um, what keeps me at it is, yeah, connecting to other authors and building that community. And I've made friends through my podcast that I wouldn't have done otherwise. People who have come on the show that I still talk to, and have continuing relationships with. And I've really enjoyed that. As an author, you're kind of sitting at your desk and it can be a little lonely if you don't have any friends in the space to talk to. And getting to know authors who are kind of going through the same thing, who are in a similar genre as myself, just because that's who I'm talking to, is science fiction and fantasy authors, is really nice to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And it reminds you, this is one of those things, human nature, you understand you probably aren't the only person going through something. But at the same time, in the moment, you're like, I feel isolated. Like no one else is
Yeah.
experiencing this frustration. The minor frustration of waiting for the KDP preview page for your book sometimes takes like an hour, and you're like, what is going on? So, other
Yeah.
people who are experiencing that's just like, oh, good. I'm not alone in this
Hmm.
situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, it's good. It's a good feeling. Have you learned anything from doing your podcast? Anything you want to change
Um,
from learning from those things?
yeah, I mean, I learned something from every guest I have on the show for sure. Um, I, I can't think of any specific examples at this point, but definitely learning different processes, like going through even through my Kickstarter. I've had a couple of guests on that have gone through the Kickstarter process. And who've been willing to help me out with my own. So, like Starcy Davies, I interviewed a couple weeks ago. She's running a podcast now, and she gave me some advice on my own page. Zach Diamante, who I think you've had on as
Hmm.
well,
Yeah.
he just ran a successful Kickstarter page. So I had some questions that I asked him about as well, and regards to that. So even just part of that, developing those connections that I can reach out and say, hey, I'm doing this thing that you just did. Can you give me some advice on how this piece, worked? Um, so that's definitely been something that I've worked on because of the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can think of a few examples as well. I think more than anything, one thing that it really highlights and is that the community is really accepting. And
Hmm.
more than likely, if you reach out to someone for help, most of the time they won't say no. If they do, nothing
Yeah,
bad on that author. You got
for
to draw a
sure.
line somewhere. Some people are
Yeah,
busier than others, but a
exactly.
majority of people be like, yeah, totally willing to help you out. Let me know,
Yeah,
ask me
definitely.
questions. And that's the great thing about the community, whether you're traditionally published or independently published. There's a lot of people that are totally willing to answer questions. And
Hmm.
going into authoring at first for me, I really didn't think about that. So I was just like Googling stuff, which kind
Yeah,
of works, right? I mean, you can Google things, but it's
yeah,
much different hearing from someone directly and not being
absolutely.
able to ask questions. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, when I first started out, I didn't even know self-publishing was a thing
yeah.
when I first started out. And seeing some of these authors who are publishing their first book and just, I figured it out right away that connecting with other authors is, how much of a benefit that is. Like I'm really envious that they figured that out for their first book because that took me a while.
You and I sound very similar in that front because I remember,
Mm,
I remember when I published my first book, I was working with an editor. I had finished it and sat on it for a year, did nothing with it. Finally, my
mm,
wife's like, "Are you going to do something with that?" And near the end of the editing process, my editor asked, "Well, how are you planning on publishing this?" And I was like, "I have no idea. Didn't even think about it." Right? Like I'm
right.
just trying to make it pretty, make it sound nice.
Mm,
And at the same time, she was like, "Well, KDP is an option." And that's when I dove in and started figuring out, well, what can I do?
hmm.
Um, but you talked a little bit about the fact that you chose to go the independent published route. I am curious to know what were the reasons behind that.
Yeah, most the biggest reason was just patience. Like I'm not
Oh, that's right. You did
super
mention
patient. Yeah.
patience. Yep.
Yeah, and that's okay. Yeah, like I mentioned, like yeah, I didn't want to sit on it for a long period of time, try to find an agent, go through that. Like I mean, writing a book is enough was enough of an effort in and of itself. I didn't want to have to, query and that sort of thing. So it was
Hmm.
really a big part of it was just, well, there's an avenue for me to just get it out and see how it does. Let's go in that direction. And I'm happy with that route so far.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
um, yeah, I mean, things might change in the future. You never know. I might decide to query something one day, but at this point, we'll keep down that road.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I heard it said that each book kind of has you have to approach it differently. You don't
Yeah.
have to, but you have to think about like, is this something that's worth traditionally publishing? Yes or no? And so far I haven't hit that yet. And I'm still pretty happy to self-publish as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, and I think that the greatest thing that I've learned is just know what works for you. I mean, you've mentioned
Yeah,
a recent job change you've had. You've mentioned your time shifts, being able to write more, not writing as much. Know what works for you and be okay with that.
definitely.
There's a lot of prescribed or glorified ways to quote unquote be successful, particularly on
Hmm.
social media, and that might not work for you, or it might not align to you and your
Yeah.
responsibilities in your life. So just be intuitive about it. Think about what works for you.
For sure. Yeah, there's so many different paths that I've seen authors follow that have worked for them, right? Or have been successful. There's no one prescribed path that authors have followed that I've seen. Everyone seems to have hit their stride in different ways.
So is there just gonna switch gears a little bit here?
Yeah.
A piece of advice, right? You've been publishing since 2020.
Hmm.
Is there something that you've learned since you started publishing that you wish you had known at the beginning, other than being able to ask other authors? You've already mentioned that piece of it.
Yeah.
Are there any other glimmers of light or piece of information that you could share?
I think if I were to start now, like let's say this was my first novel I was publishing, I would definitely say know the genre you're publishing in.
Hmm.
That's something I didn't really know was something I needed to do. I just thought I have a story, I'm gonna tell it. Um, but I think I my advice would be to read more and definitely read more in the genre that you're writing in. I was writing a YA dystopia, and because in my head, I liked The Hunger Games. But The Hunger Games was 15 years ago, and
Yeah.
dystopia has changed. So, and dystopia is not even really a genre that's doing well at the moment. I mean, now I started writing pre-COVID. Publishing a dystopia during COVID was not the easiest thing to do, or maybe not the smartest idea, um, but I would read more in the genre that I'm writing in and really understand the tropes and the um, why people like the parts of the genre that they do a little bit better. I wrote a YA dystopia that really follows the format of an epic fantasy, which is fine, but it's hard to market that. So if you want to be able to market effectively, you have to know who your audience is and what they're looking for in a story.
So do you feel like you have a good reflection of who your audience is today with this next book, or is that still a little bit up in the air?
Yeah, I think, I definitely second guess myself. So like
Yeah.
I'm not going into this thinking, well, I know exactly who. But I did when writing this book and, leading up to writing this book, I read a lot of cozy fantasy stories to try to get that sense because I didn't want to make that mistake. Um, there are things about this that are, it's cozy fantasy, but You know, there's certain things that are, I mean, you don't want to, I didn't want to write Legends and Lattes again because that's been done a dozen times, right? I wanted something that was a little different, but still had the essence of cozy fantasy. So, I mean, cozy fantasy is a lot about finding where you belong. It's a lot about found family. It's a lot about feel good, those feel good vibes that, you know, people want to sit, have their cup of tea under a warm blanket and feel good that their main character, their favorite character is not going to die. Their favorite character is not going to be stabbed, or um, there's still tension, but it's not epic tension. It's more not just slice of life, but just more personal, right? It's more of a personal journey. So um, I definitely feel like I understand this genre that I'm writing in a lot better than I did um, YA Dystopia when I wrote my first series for sure. Um, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question or if I just danced all
No,
around it, but
absolutely answered the question. And I think, that's the biggest challenge about marketing is, there's different people that write before they think about marketing. There's people that think about marketing before they write. And I think there you can make either work. Some may be easier than others. Just be aware of that when you get into the book. Um,
Mhm.
I think there's plenty of people that have been successful by writing a book and then marketing it after, as opposed to thinking about who's my audience, what am I writing towards now. I'm sure some of the successful authors would hear this and be like, he's lying, don't listen to him. But I really think it does come down to there's people that'll read most of anything.
Yeah.
And finding those readers, I think that's going to be the trickiest part. Some things
Mhm.
are easier to market than others. I agree with my first series. It's not the easiest to market, but you know, figuring it out. It's it's one of those things where it was a story that needed to be written, and I'm glad that I wrote it. So
Absolutely.
I'm sure you feel the same way about your series as well,
Definitely.
however difficult they are to market them. But um, no, I appreciate you joining me today. This has been an amazing conversation. I feel like we could keep
Yeah,
diving down all the different. There's so many things to talk about when it comes to
for
publishing.
sure.
So many
Yeah.
things. But where can people find more information about you and your Kickstarter and your books?
Yeah. The best place to start is on my website, hermansteuernagal.com. You can find me on Instagram at Herman Steuernagal and on TikTok at Herman Steuernagal Writes. My books, my Fractured Orbit series and my Lives of the Guardian series are available in Amazon, Kindle Unlimited, and the Bartender Between Worlds will be available anywhere books are sold. I'm publishing this one wide. So
Nice. Actually, I did, before we jump off here, I do have one more
yeah.
question because I am curious. Just for, people listening, whether you're doing Kickstarter or not, whether you're doing KU or not, I'm curious to know what route did you take for publishing your special edition? Um, is there a specific system you used to get that formatted and printed?
So I did the formatting myself.
Mm,
I mean, through my day job, I have access to the Adobe Suite and that sort of thing. So I put
nice.
together that myself. I printed it through BookVault, um, based in the UK. They do the gold foil and all that. They have templates to follow. I mean, there's a number of different printers that you can use. They were just the kind of the most accessible as far as doing the special things like the gold foiling and the color pages.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it was Bookfall because I know people have used other things, but
Mm,
I'm looking into potentially doing a Kickstarter someday. Someday.
nice. Yeah.
People listening, someday. They're thinking, wait, he's mentioned this before. I have lots of thoughts, but it really just comes down to getting it organized. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
Book Vault is great. I've used it before and
Nice.
definitely recommend it for
Yeah,
anybody
this was my first
listening.
experience with it, and I was thrilled with the result.
Yeah, they're very, very good. And its system is really easy to use compared to other ones. We won't name
Really
them.
easy. Yeah.
In any case, thank you again for joining me. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Dan. I hope we get to chat soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for listening. I hope you found that interesting. I know that Herman is a very positive person. I've really enjoyed his podcast. I've learned a lot from that. And I hope that you take a chance to listen to his as well. Next week, we'll be talking to James Aylett about bringing the real world into your writing. James has a very interesting view on taking real life experiences, twisting them, and turning it into very comedic and entertaining, almost dramatic stories, and he's just a very delightful person to talk to. He moved to the United States from Europe, and he has just a very, very awesome insight and perspective on life. So you want to tune into that conversation next week. Just a note for you that there will be only a video update from me. James has asked that there will be no video for that, which I totally fine with. I'm happy to do that. But just keep in mind that it will just be audio, just to respect his wishes. But still, the conversation is very much worth listening to if you're listening to it on YouTube. Of course, if you'd like to join me on the podcast, just head to thecasualauthor.com, fill out the pitch form, tell me about yourself, what you're passionate about, and I'd love to have you. So I'm always looking for more authors or editors or cover designers, anybody who's interested in sharing their story and just having a very great, casual, uplifting conversation about themselves and their books. So definitely head over there or send the link to your friends. If you know someone who's trying to get out there and wants to have a good conversation on a podcast, send them my way. I'd love to chat with them. But thanks for listening today, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Look forward to talking to you next week.